So, uh, think about how we're traditionally taught to view a classic car engine. It's the ultimate symbol of straightforward mechanics.
Right, totally predictable. Input always equals output.
Exactly. You turn the key, the spark plug fires, the fuel ignites, and the car moves forward. And for the longest time, that is exactly how our culture, and honestly, even a lot of early science, treated the inner workings of men in relationships.
Like they're just these simple, unemotional combustion engines.
Right. But the thing is, when you actually lift the hood on male emotionality and intimacy, that simple engine manual is entirely useless.
Oh, completely. You're instantly looking at one of the most multifaceted, highly sensitive biological and psychological systems we know of. It's just disguised as a simple machine by centuries of social conditioning.
And that disguise is exactly what we are tearing down in today's deep dive. So for you listening, whether you're a man trying to navigate these incredibly heavy cultural expectations, or you're someone trying to better understand the emotional landscape of a male partner, we've got a fascinating stack of research to unpack.
Yeah, we are covering a lot of ground today.
We really are. We're looking at everything from medical literature on desire and psychological evaluations of adult attachment to real-time daily tracking of couples and neurobiological brain scans.
And the mission here is to completely dismantle the myth of the emotionless male, right?
Exactly. We want to map out the hidden physiological cravings of the male nervous system. So where do we start?
Well, to really understand this, we have to start at the foundation of how boys are built into men. There's this deeply striking concept from the theorist Bell Hooks, which was highlighted in a clinical breakdown we reviewed from the Empowered Connections counseling blog.
Oh, right, the psychic self-mutilation quote.
Yes. She wrote that patriarchy essentially demands that males engage in acts of psychic self-mutilation.
Hmm.
It requires them to actively kill off their own emotional parts in order to be accepted as men.
Psychic self-mutilation. I mean, that is a heavy, violent phrase.
It's intense, but it captures the reality perfectly.
It really does. Because from the moment boys hit the playground, they're taught that emotional control is the baseline for survival. Crying is framed as an absolute failure.
Right, and fear is immediately rebranded as weakness.
Yeah. Vulnerability isn't just frowned upon. It's treated as a literal threat to their identity and their safety among their peers.
And that structural reality creates a massive biological problem. Because suppressing those emotions doesn't just, magically vaporize them.
They have to go somewhere.
Exactly, it traps them inside the body. Clinically, when we look at men who spent decades engaging in this emotional suppression, it manifests as severe physical and psychological symptoms.
Like what kind of symptoms?
It turns into chronic insomnia, severe gastrointestinal issues, tension headaches, and when depression hits, it rarely looks like the stereotypical sadness we're conditioned to expect.
Oh, wow. So what does it look like instead?
It looks like intense burnout, sudden irritability, disproportionate anger over small things, or just a total numbing disengagement from their family.
It makes me think of trying to hold a massive, fully inflated beach ball underwater.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right. You're standing in a pool, pushing this thing down beneath the surface so nobody can see it. And to everyone else, the water looks perfectly calm.
But beneath the surface, your arms are shaking.
Exactly. You're expending an exhausting amount of invisible, continuous physical energy just to maintain the illusion of calm. And the second your grip slips,
That ball launches out of the water and hits someone in the face.
yeah, which perfectly explains those sudden, unpredictable outbursts of anger. And this invisible exhaustion completely rewrites how we need to look at male sexuality.
It really does. For decades, the narrative was that male desire was just a light switch. You flip it, and the engine starts.
But the medical consensus absolutely rejects that now. When you dive into the literature on male sexual desire, it operates on this highly complex biopsychosocial model.
Let's actually break down what that term means for a real person on, like, a random Tuesday night.
Yeah, please do.
Biopsychosocial means the biology, the hormones, the blood flow is only 1/3 of the equation.
Okay.
The psychological and the social factors are actually holding the steering wheel. Things like underlying anxiety, unrecognized depression, communication friction.
And just the sheer exhausting weight of trying to live up to those restrictive cultural scripts of masculinity.
Exactly. Those are deeply, intricately involved in whether a man experiences sexual interest or not. Biology alone is entirely insufficient to spark desire if the psychological system is overloaded.
But think about the paradox that creates. If society tells a man his entire worth is tied to his endurance, and he's spending 90% of his internal energy holding that emotional beach ball underwater.
How does he ever have the bandwidth to genuinely connect with a partner without his system crashing?
Right. It seems impossible.
That friction is why the therapeutic process is often so revolutionary for men. When men enter therapy, the first thing they have to learn is a completely alien approach to their own minds.
Alien in what way?
Well, they have to learn to stop treating their feelings as threats that need to be neutralized and start treating them simply as data.
Interesting. Just treating it as information.
Yes, and the neuroscience backing this up is incredible. The mere act of putting a name to a difficult emotion physically activates the regulatory regions of the prefrontal cortex.
Which acts like a brake pedal on the body's stress response, right?
Exactly.
Wow.
Embracing emotional awareness actually increases a man's feeling of control. It doesn't erode it like they're taught to believe.
Okay. But if the mind is culturally gagged and trained to hide everything, we have to look past the mind entirely. We have to look at what the body is doing behind the scenes.
Which brings us to one of the most revealing pieces of research in this entire stack.
Yes, the ecological momentary assessment study. Researchers wanted to know what happens physiologically when couples interact in the real world, so they took over 100 dating couples and hooked them up to ambulatory sensors as they just went about their normal, chaotic daily lives.
And the researchers were continuously monitoring something called electrodermal activity, or EDA.
Right. And just to clarify for everyone, EDA is essentially measuring microscopic changes in sweat gland activity, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
So it's almost like a continuous wearable lie detector test that tracks the sympathetic nervous system. It tells us when the body's fight or flight response is flaring up with stress or anxiety.
That's a perfect way to look at it. So the participants wore these monitors and logged whether they were together or apart from their partner hour by hour.
And the data was wild.
Profound, really, for both men and women. Merely having their romantic partner present in the same room significantly lowered their physiological arousal.
Just being in the same room.
Just being there. The baseline stress of navigating the world dropped. Their autonomic nervous systems literally sighed in relief and calmed down just by being in the physical orbit of their partner.
Which proves connection isn't just a nice idea, it's a literal biological tether. But I have to ask, how does that tether hold up against different personality types? Because, not everyone reacts to intimacy the same way.
Right, and that requires bringing in adult attachment theory. Psychologists generally map human attachment into four main styles: secure, anxious-preoccupied, dismissive-avoidant, and fearful-avoidant.
Okay, the classic four styles.
Yeah, and the majority of the population, around 70 to 80%, develops a relatively stable attachment style early in life. That style acts as a lens for how they view intimacy.
So how did that play into the sensor study?
The study found that individuals who scored lower on anxious and avoidant traits, so people who lean more toward a secure attachment, experienced the absolute strongest physiological calming effect when their partner walked into the room.
Okay, I have to challenge this, though, based on the dismissive-avoidant profile.
Let's hear it.
Think about the classic dismissive-avoidant man. His entire outward identity is built on a fortress of independence. He's the guy who explicitly states he doesn't need close relationships, he hates depending on others, and he actively walls off his feelings.
Right.
So are you telling me that a guy who has built his whole personality around not needing his partner still has a body that reacts when they walk in?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, that's the most revealing part of the literature on avoidant attachment.
Really?
Yeah. The clinical data explicitly notes that this style is highly defensive. On the surface, this man might appear totally unaffected. He might be sitting on the couch, staring at his phone, acting like it makes zero difference to him whether his partner is home or out of town.
Broadcasting, I am an island.
Exactly. His conscious mind says he's an island. But the research shows that beneath that icy exterior, individuals with dismissive-avoidant styles still exhibit massive physiological reactions to emotionally loaded situations. The nervous system completely betrays the mind's social conditioning. His body is still deeply physically reliant on that connection, even as his mouth denies it.
The body remembers what the mind is forced to forget. That is fascinating. So if a man's nervous system is quietly screaming for connection and relies on a partner to lower its stress, but society has basically beaten the verbal vocabulary out of him.
How does he bridge the gap?
Yeah, how do you speak when you aren't allowed to use words?
Use the oldest, most fundamental language we have, touch.
Right.
And not just sexual contact, but the highly nuanced, deeply ingrained language of tactile communication.
There is a brilliant study that isolated exactly how this physical language works. The opaque curtain
This
study.
one is so interesting.
Researchers took over 200 unacquainted individuals, complete strangers, and placed them on opposite sides of a black curtain. They couldn't see each other's faces, they couldn't hear each other's voices.
Right.
One person was tasked with trying to communicate 12 distinct, complex emotions to the stranger on the other side, using only their hands to touch the stranger's bare arm.
Which is brilliant because by stripping away facial expressions, vocal tone, and body language, the researchers isolated touch as a pure, unfiltered communication medium.
And the way men and women utilized that medium was wildly different. When it came to communicating the emotion of sympathy, it was only successfully decoded, meaning the stranger guessed it at a rate better than random chance, when a female was involved in the pairing.
Because women instinctively used a patting or stroking motion to transmit sympathy.
Right, but anger. Anger was only accurately communicated when at least one male was involved, and they typically used a firm squeezing or gripping motion.
And the absolute most accurate pairings for successfully communicating anger through a blind curtain were the all-male groups.
Why is that? What does the science say about that divide?
The science community points to evolutionary and social role accounts. Over centuries, societal structures have stereotypically granted men roles that demand competition, self-assertion, and the defense of status.
Okay, that makes sense.
Because of that, anger has become the culturally sanctioned male emotion. It's the one acceptable pressure release valve.
And women?
Conversely, society heavily socializes women for caretaking. From the toys they're given as children to cultural stereotypes and media portrayals, women are trained to both broadcast and receive sympathy at a highly tuned level.
But if we follow that logic to its end, it paints an incredibly bleak picture. Are men biologically trapped in a physical language where the only loud, culturally approved emotion they can successfully transmit through their hands is aggression?
It sounds like it, doesn't it?
Yeah, because if society says you can't cry, you can't speak your fears, and your hands only know how to squeeze in frustration, I mean, where is the relief? That sounds like solitary confinement inside your own body.
It would be solitary confinement if not for a crucial biological workaround known as the buffer effect.
The buffer effect.
Yeah. Even if the active broadcasting of complex, gentle emotions is stunted by decades of gender norms, the human body's reception of touch remains universally healing.
Oh, that's right. The fMRI study.
Exactly. There's a fascinating functional MRI study where participants were placed inside a brain scanner and shown moderately disturbing, highly stressful images.
Basically a deliberate attempt to spike their anxiety.
Right. But when those participants held their romantic partner's hand while viewing the disturbing images, the scanners picked up a significant drop in connectivity between the anterior insula and the anterior cingulate cortex.
Okay, translate that brain anatomy for me. What does that drop in connectivity actually feel like?
So the anterior insula acts a bit like the brain's central alarm bell for physical pain and emotional disgust. It's the siren that blares when something is wrong.
Okay.
Holding a partner's hand physically muffled that alarm system. The touch of a trusted person triggers the release of oxytocin, which actively lowers blood pressure and flushes stress hormones out of the bloodstream.
It acts as a biological backdoor.
Precisely. A man might not have the culturally approved vocabulary to sit down and say, I am feeling incredibly vulnerable and overwhelmed today, but reaching out and holding his partner's hand bypasses the need for verbal vulnerability entirely.
The skin is our largest sensory organ, and it provides a direct line to the nervous system when words fail.
It really does.
Which brings us to the ultimate question. How does all of this, the suppressed verbal emotion, the intense physiological reliance on a partner's presence, and this heavy reliance on tactile communication, ignite romantic passion and sexual desire?
This touches on one of the longest-running debates in psychology. Because for decades, the mainstream assumption in sexology was that male desire and female desire operated on completely different, almost opposing tracks.
And the prime example of that was the Baumeister and Bretslavsky model.
Yes, exactly.
This is a famous psychological theory that claimed intimacy alone wasn't enough to trigger passion in men. The model argued that women experience rising desire through a steady, peaceful accumulation of emotional intimacy. But it claimed that men needed sharp, abrupt, dramatic spikes in intimacy to feel desire, like the rush of making up after a massive screaming fight.
Yeah, it framed male desire as requiring conflict, novelty, or a sudden contrast to ignite, while viewing steady emotional connection as something that would just, bore them.
Which sounds so stereotypically backwards now.
It was a very popular theory because it aligned perfectly with the cultural stereotype of the aggressive, thrill-seeking male. But researchers recently put it to the ultimate test using another real-world tracking method.
The ESM Daily Diary study.
Right. They took over 130 participants in long-term romantic relationships and beeped them 10 times a day for a full week. Every time the pager went off, the participants had to immediately log their exact, real-time feelings of emotional intimacy and their level of sexual desire.
So they weren't relying on people's fuzzy memories of how they felt last week. They captured the raw data in the moment.
Exactly. And the data completely, unequivocally debunked the idea that men need conflict to feel passion.
Completely debunked it.
Yes. The real-time tracking proved that for both men and women, higher levels of emotional intimacy directly lead to higher sexual desire, which in turn predicts partnered sexual activity.
So there was zero statistical difference between the genders.
Zero statistical difference in how rising intimacy predicted desire. Men's sexual desire is just as intimately, consistently, and profoundly tethered to feeling emotionally close as women's desire is.
And we know this isn't just a psychological preference. It's physically mapped into the neurobiology of the male brain.
Yes, the fMRI study on love versus lust.
Right. Neuroscientists took young men and women from 11 different countries who reported being truly, deeply, and madly in love. They put them in fMRI machines and showed them different sets of photographs. One set was designed to elicit pure lust-raw sexual desire, and the other set was designed to elicit romantic love.
And the brain scans showed those two feelings living in completely different neighborhoods of the brain.
Which is so cool.
It is. Lust, that pure physical urge, lit up the ventral striatum. This is a dopamine-rich area of the brain that handles immediate inherent pleasure. It's the same area that lights up when you eat a piece of chocolate or win a hand of blackjack.
Oh, right, the sugar rush.
Yeah, exactly. But the photographs that elicited romantic love activated the dorsal striatum. This area is completely different. It's tied to the complex process of assigning inherent value to something through long-term conditioning.
So it's about deep, rewarding habits.
Yes. True passion, the kind that sustains a long-term, committed romantic relationship, requires both areas to fire together. It proves that for men, deep relational intimacy isn't just an abstract concept they tolerate to get to the physical stuff. It is physically, biologically mapped in the male brain right alongside desire.
So if we step back and look at the entire landscape we have covered today, the conclusion is unavoidable. The idea that men are simple, emotionless machines who only care about the physical mechanics of a relationship is a culturally fabricated myth.
It's a story we've been sold that completely collapses the second you look at the data.
Right. Beneath the heavy, exhausting patriarchal conditioning to suppress vulnerability, there is a highly complex nervous system that literally relies on a partner's physical presence to find peace.
Absolutely.
There is a brain that deeply physically links emotional intimacy to sexual desire. And there is a body that constantly uses touch to communicate the profound needs that society says words cannot express.
And understanding this isn't about blaming men for being closed off.
No, not at all.
It's about recognizing that emotional literacy, knowing how to recognize your internal state and how to communicate it without shame, is a learned skill. Redefining strength as the capacity to feel, rather than the ability to endure numbness, is an expansion of the human experience that benefits everyone.
I completely agree. It leaves you with something huge to think about. If our brains physically map the difference between immediate lust and deep love, and our autonomic nervous systems automatically sigh in relief when our partners are near, we are biologically wired for profound connection.
We really are. So what happens to human evolution if we finally permanently dismantle the patriarchal rules of emotional suppression?
Wow.
If we raise a generation of boys who are fully fluent in their own emotions, boys who treat their feelings as essential data rather than existential threats, how much deeper and how much more powerful might the human capacity for intimacy actually become?